How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Agave and Cactus Talk. Today I wanted to talk about a question that I got asked by one of my homies. I've kind of talked about it in the past before, and it has to do with Agave Saponins and their potential for disrupting the chemical industry in the United States and globally. But when I was talking to this friend, I was telling him about my use of saponins to treat different pests and funguses or different things I may see on my plants. And he asked me, well, could agave potentially one day disrupt the, billion pounds of pesticides that are sprayed annually in the United States? And I responded, yes, definitely they will have an impact. And the fact that saponins can be so widely applied to different issues shows really its promise. If you listen to the Agave podcast I did, we went into how saponins has a lot of medicinal potential because of these same benefits. But in terms of chemical spraying in the United States, I think agave has the potential to revolutionize and lower a lot of that spraying of really toxic stuff, So the United States has like 6 or 7 dozen heavy use chemicals, which are some of the main pesticides that are used. And some of our most widely used pesticides on that list are banned in a lot of other agricultural powerhouse areas, right? Like I give an example, like Holland or the Netherlands is one of the largest global agricultural producers, and they don't have any of these chemicals that we use legalized, essentially, like the vast majority of them. Good example of that obviously is paraquat, which no lawyer, doctor, but you can do your own research on how paraquat has influenced the American people, right? I would say not for the positive. And chemicals like that, banned in multiple places. People always talk about the EU, but many of these chemicals are banned in, places around Latin America as well. But essentially, I had been talking to my homie about how I seen a infestation of weevil on some of my plants. Really early infestation on some Agave Americana cultivar high deserts, and I had lost a good amount of them, but on this one agave it was still pretty early on, and I had sprayed a bunch of saponin rich water essentially into this agave, into its core, and that had pretty much killed the pest. And after 2 or 3 applications, and the agave was a little stunted, but it recovered, and it is continuing to grow very well. And then I had told him about how some of these plagued plants that I might have brought from Los Angeles region through some of my clients' gardens that might have been plagued, I was applying saponin rich water onto them to get rid of a lot of their fungal issues, which many of them came from over irrigation or just poor garden management. So I would save a lot of these plants by treating their fungi, right, that they had. And I know saponins also is naturally a antibacterial. So I'm sure it's getting rid of lots of different bacteria as well on the surface of these agaves that I was treating. But the interesting part for me has always been that saponins are naturally derived, so they can symbiotically live with other bacteria, fungi, and different things on the plant that it sees as beneficial. But it has an effect on all of these things that we treat as far as plagues or fungi or bacteria infections on these plants. So it could be sprayed and it's going to biodegrade really, really quickly into the soil. So it's not like, for instance, a glyphosate application or something that may stay in your soil for years, right? So you can apply it as even a herbicide, these saponin applications. And the saponins, as far as I understand how it's working when it's being used as a herbicide, is that it can essentially destroy the cell walls and membranes of small herbs that are coming out or ground cover, right? Much like a herbicide. But it's not going to completely kill everything to the point where your soil is uncovered or destroyed. What it's going to do is stunt. So in the case, for instance, I'll give an example of a Roundup application in a vineyard. What you don't want is the grass growing over the trunk of the grapes that can set in rot, disease, be a hosting ground for pests and stuff. So they'll apply Roundup to try to get rid of a lot of these weeds, and then that's not on the grapevines, right? Well, a lot of the issue is that these grapes may have a stunt period when that application happens, where they also get hurt a bit because of that, right? So they might have gotten rid of the grass through the herbicide application, but then they also stunt their own plant's growth. So you're not going to have that either through saponin-rich applications of saponin water, because the plant is going to be continuing to grow, whereas the stuff around it is going to be stunted. And essentially it won't completely kill all of the grass, but it'll limit it to being only a few inches and not interfering with whatever plant that you have, right? Even if it's super low to the ground, like some vegetables. And that's really significant, because a lot of the chemical spraying in the United States are, even in the number one nation that sprays, like Brazil, it's really insecticides, which are roughly classified as pesticides. And most of these chemicals are all under the branch, you could say, of pesticides, right? So insecticide, herbicides are pesticides, right? Or fungicides are pesticides. But pesticides, a lot of the time when people are talking about them, they're talking about a specific pest, right? So many of the times they're talking about actual insecticides. And the saponins actually can deal with a lot of the insecticide stuff as well. But the point being, most of the chemicals fall into fungicide, insecticide, herbicide. And saponin is able to effectively control all three. So it can have an effect on insects, it can have an effect on herbaceous plants, it can have an effect on the fungi, and once again, it's something that is gonna still leave a lot of the natural stuff that should be there. So I'll give an example. A lot of the times, if you are using antibacterial stuff a lot, what happens is like these super bacteria might form where it becomes, ineffective, right? And that's happening really because these antibacterial things are getting rid of all the bacteria, including good bacteria, right? So that happens a lot of the times, for instance, when we spray as a farmer a herbicide, because you get rid of the good ground cover, right? Like you're trying to get rid of some maybe crabgrass, and you get rid of the low-growing natives that are going to only benefit your farm, right? Or in the case of pests, or of insects, right? You're like, oh, I got weevil. Let me spray for weevil. Some crazy. Google chemical treatments for agave weevil, and you'll just see like a dozen crazy ass chemicals, half of them banned in the United States for treating it. And what'll happen is they treat the weevil, and they end up killing all of the beneficial insects or fungi in some cases through that one pesticide application. And what this creates is a feedback loop that just creates stronger stuff, which means you have to apply more, and it's ineffective after a certain amount of time. Whereas the saponins is only going to get rid of something that is, not supposed to be there, and it'll leave a lot of the natural stuff. And when you apply it, it's not going to be hindering your soil microbiome because it biodegrades very quickly. And I think a lot of these chemicals, one by one, they could start being tackled by saponins, right? Like even a lot of the pre-treatment of plants before they go into greenhouses, before they cross borders, before they're moved. A lot of that could be done with saponins in a saponin bath, right? Like where you're dipping the plants into this and having them have some pest and fungus, prevention or defense, right? So get into how I use the saponins. I talked about it in the Vilmoriano podcast, but it's very simple, and you don't only need agave, or you can't only use agave Vilmoriano, or I guess you don't only have to use agave Vilmoriano. There's other high saponin agaves. Many of the Manfreda, family that's now been lumped into agave. Many of them are high saponins, right? So some of the Texas Manfredas and Manfredas that are on the West Coast are very high saponins and been used by indigenous United States peoples for generations for soaps and cleaning, sterilization, all types of stuff. And in terms of the agave, you also have Agave Vilmoriana, which has a really wide range, right, from Sonora all the way down into the forest in southern Mexico, central Mexico. You have Agave Shoddy, which is also a very high saponin agave, and Agave Habali, also renowned high saponin agave. And these agaves, they're so high saponin that, there's no real science to making these chemical solutions, right? So all you have to do is get a very green plant leaf of, say, Agave Vilmoriana, and cut off the edges so it begins bleeding. And obviously make sure to do this with a knife, or you're going to saponin your goddamn self, and you're going to be itching like a motherfucker. But cut the leaves off, the leaf ends off, the spike at the top, and then cut that into pieces large enough that you could put in a bucket, right? Leave that for ideally 3 days, but it could be done in as few as 1 day, right? And you're going to leave it 24 to 72 hours, and that saponins is going to leach into the water. Almost like if you've done this with aloe vera, where you put the sides of the aloe vera leaf and you put it in water so that the tannins leach out, right? So that you can eat that aloe vera without gel, without having that nasty taste, right? So the saponin is going to do the same thing, leach into the water, and then that water can easily be, what I do, for instance, is I fill the bucket up 80%, and then I'll put some leaves in there so it's not overflowing or nothing. But then once it's, saponin rich, I could take that and now put it in a backpack sprayer. I could put it in, some type of ATV sprayer, some type of tractor sprayer, whatever your form of spraying is. I've always been a backpack sprayer because, I never used chemicals. When I did use chemicals, it was in gardening at the beginning of my career. And I only did it for like 1 or 2 years, and then I just had this backpack sprayer on the wall for like a decade, until saponins. And then I finally realized, I can make my own, chemicals and stuff that can treat the fungi or the pest or the insects, whatever. And they're biodegradable natural substances that are coming from the agave itself, right? So what better to treat agave with than agave? Like, I'm telling you how it could be applied to all range of plants and stuff, but I think the biggest thing here is that, right, that the solution for treating a lot of agave may come from the agave itself, because, it's evolved to figure that out, and it's in its DNA already. We don't need to go looking for a solution. But anyways, those implications of how I'm using the saponins, right, and are really significant, I think, for the global chemical use. And once I apply them on the pest or the herb or the weeds or the, what do you call it, fungus, you'll start seeing effects within, sometimes 24 hours. It's really quickly, and I think a lot of this can be, a real lifesaver for farmers, right? Because a lot of the times these chemicals like Roundup or, any type of fungicide, a lot of the times they have efficacy rates of something that may take weeks, to actually see the effect, and it needs a lot of multiple dosages. So you're spraying a lot, getting very little back in return, right? So my whole thing has always been, the more money you have to spend on chemicals as a farmer, the less profitable you will be. And that's definitely, the case the past 10 years in consulting, because most of the times as a consultant, I'm coming in and getting rid of a, $250,000 bill, $500,000 bill, chemical regime that a farm may have, and be replacing it with a $500,000 animal operation that creates all of their own fertilizations or fertilizer that they need, and they can even sell a lot of that into the market and the animals into the market. So instead of wasting so much money, they're actually turning that, not using it at all, and making hella money with, a little ingenuity. But the point is, this really, I would say, attracted me, the saponin use, because of its ease, right? You don't need to be suited up and shit, like fucking looking like some hazmat individual, like when you go spray Roundup, like we would do on the vineyards and stuff, and you could be out there in your fucking sandals and shit applying this, and it's gonna be helpful, man. If anything, you get some on some of your feet, man. I've seen some of y'all's feet, man. The fucking athlete's foot. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world getting rid of some of that fungus. Some of y'all farmers need to take your boots off more than a few times a day, man. But anyways, yeah, saponins, I think, has the potential, to revolutionize the chemical industry. And I think this is important to start utilizing it and start making a lot of, supply of it, because this is something that's in so many plants that's naturally derived, and it could be really, really helpful for the world, right? So, I mean, sure, I'm telling you that agave is a very high concentration of saponins, but they could get this stuff from different plants such as beetroots. There's different plants that have high saponins, right? Like the Manfredos I was telling you about, some of the Agaves, right? But yeah, I just wanted to talk about this today because a lot of people are starting up agave and cactus farms and small farms around the world, and they're, spending a lot of money on chemicals, destroying their soil, destroying their earth, destroying their water systems, destroying them. Some of the highest rates of cancer are within the farming and farm worker community because we are up close with a lot of these chemicals, right? So the biggest thing that got me away from chemicals was seeing what it was doing to my own people, because unfortunately most of us Mexicans are the ones that are harvesting all of this shit, that are packaging it up, that are moving it, and that means that we're exposed to a lot of these things, right? But the other thing that I really like behind saponins, like I said, it's quickly biodegradable, so you don't have to worry about, for instance, bioaccumulation, right? So a lot of the fruits and vegetables, wine, beer that you may buy in the store has glyphosate, in parts per billion, in that food or drink. And they can't get it out of the stuff because the agricultural inputs that came into the system to create that product were heavily, sprayed. And people, they obviously have, issues that arise from the continued use of all of these products, right? So as a farmer, I know that my products are going to be a lot more healthier because by the time they get to the store and people consume them, they're not going to have any of these chemicals that other companies have bioaccumulated on their plants, right? So also really attractive thing behind it. And we've been talking about the spraying of a lot of this shit, right? But I will say too, saponins are a good antibacterial, and a lot of the pests now that are affecting, for instance, trees, and now I give the example of the almond trees that are dealing with bacterias, or different vegetable crops, and a lot of these you can call it bacterias are untreatable. You know what I mean? Like a lot of them are not something that they've developed efficient way to control, right? Like if they did, they would have solved it by now, a lot of these plagues, right? So saponins, I think, could be a ripe candidate for seeing how it can be applied in a manner to a lot of these orchards or vegetable crops that may have these bacteria infections commonly, maybe as a post, mid, and or a pre and post treatment to the soil before and after you plant these things, right? So that that bacteria is not naturally building up in the soil and affecting your plants, right, before they get going. Because a lot of the times the bacteria, it's in the soil, for instance. It's not something that's airborne. It's not something that's, coming, well, I guess it can come through other channels, right? So, I mean, you can import stock of plants that have the bacteria, right? And then everything could get it. But what I'm just seeing is a tremendous potential for these saponins to affect the global market, right? So I was talking about how the United States using a billion pounds of agricultural chemicals a year. Well, Brazil uses double that. And globally, I think America and Brazil are 1 and 2. And most countries, their chemical use is dropping, which is great. I think, this can only accelerate that shift to something that's what do you call it? That's natural or actually organic, right? Because my biggest concern with the organic and now regenerative classifications by the USDA has always been that they can continue to spray stuff. So a lot of these organic farmers, just because it's organic certified, they're spraying these chemicals on their stuff, but you know, the EPA, or Environmental Protection Agency, it's very debatable how they're fucking approving a lot of these chemicals, right? And behind back doors, there's definitely a lot of deals going on for the approval of this shit. So it's gotten to a point where, like, you know, no one can really trust the organic certification anymore, because there's still companies under that certification spraying a whole ton of shit, you know? And a lot of that stuff, here's my classification of organic, right? Only shit from nature. How about that one, right? Because any chemical that is synthetically made, I don't give a fuck if they say it's OMRI listed, if it's USDA approved, if it's whatever the fuck. It's still a chemical that is synthetically created by humans, and if it doesn't have decades of study behind it, you have to almost assume that there will be some, you know, disbenefits to that, dude. That there will be issues with that. So, I, for one, rather take the safe road and not apply a lot of this bullshit that decades down the line it comes out that we probably shouldn't have been applying it anyways, you know? It's like the what do you call it? The sugar-free stuff, right? It's like the aspartame or shit like that, right? Like, people, they replace something with a worse candidate, actually, but they try to convince you that it's great by providing no research. And that just, I don't even know how they believe it themselves. But anyways, saponins, you know, it's going to be a big industry, because I'm telling you right now how it can affect every sector of the chemical spray industry in the United States, right? And that industry, just the chemicals alone, there's, you know, tens of billions of dollars of chemicals that are sold every year, right? So 1 billion pounds applied, but probably 10 to 20 billion dollars value of those chemicals. Now think of all the actual spraying companies, of all the consultants, of all the property managements, of all the gardeners, landscapers, arborists, and you think about all of the chemical that they, you know, are spraying, and the economic value behind all of those companies. I mean, you know, you take that 10, 20 billion and you crank it up to probably, you know, 80 to 100 billion dollars, right? The other day I was telling you, just in landscaping alone, there's 100,000 landscapers. And many of them are applying chemicals all the time, even though technically they're not supposed to, right? Especially in California, you're supposed to have your pesticide applicator license, even if you're doing it on the gardening scale, because of the dangerousness of a lot of these chemicals. But people, they don't care. But, you know, I will say, if you are a gardener or a farmer and people just tell you go apply this shit, don't just listen to them. Read the fucking back of the label, right? Like, people, I used to see it all the time in vineyard systems. They would just hand Roundup to people and say, go spray this shit. And I'm like, what? Nuh-uh, man. When I go spray Roundup, I'm in my hazmat suit. You know what I mean? You read the fucking bottle, and you say, hey, spraying commercial Roundup, what am I supposed to do? It tells you right there. It's like, you gotta be suited up, right? But don't let people pressure you into spraying chemicals that you have no knowledge about, because you're gonna be the one suffering with the medical problems later on, not that person. So fuck that, you know. Stay safe out there. But I think that this, you know, say $100 billion of chemicals and chemical companies in the United States, we also don't want them to quash saponins, right? Because I give the example where there's been times in the past where, you know, for instance, like certain companies, they'll take out a whole industry because they don't want that industry to, once it blows up, take out their industry, right? So we don't want chemical companies to take out saponins because of their potential to revolutionize the chemical industry for agriculture. We don't want them to take them out for, you know, the use in agriculture, and then we can't use them in medicine, right? Because I was telling you in the Vilmoriana podcast how a lot of scientists are believing now that saponins maybe one of the candidates in creating suitable cancer treatments and a whole range of stuff, from diabetes to fucking hyperinflammation. A lot of problems that humans deal with. Saponins are now being investigated and researched as a cure or as a treatment solution to many of these things, right? So we don't want those medicinal benefits to be taken out by the chemical companies if they start trying to patent and create a whole bunch of synthetic saponins, or we don't know how they'll play it. But a lot of the times, for instance, I give an example, whether it's true or not, many people believe that a huge reason why marijuana was turned illegal was because people knew that paper could be made from hemp, and the timber companies didn't want this to be mass adopted over their timber product and paper products, so they decided to support the illegalization of it, right? And I mean, at some point, it doesn't even scream conspiracy anymore when a lot of the facts come out, right? But the point that I'm making is, even if you believe that that's a conspiracy or not, what you have to know for sure is that when a huge billion-dollar corporation is threatened by a new change in an industry, that they're not going to just cast themselves aside. So while saponins could be very revolutionary for the chemical or the medicinal industries in the United States, they have to be safeguarded and made available to be researched and utilized by a wide range of companies, agriculture and in medicine and in academics, so that we could see the full potential of them, right? Because right now, we don't want to quash all of this great research, right? But yeah, anyways, I just wanted to come on today. This podcast relatively quick for my podcast, right? Like 30 minutes. But just wanted to talk about how saponins, I think, could be game changing for the world, and I hope one day it's more than just a few indigenous Mexican farmers using them, right? And that some of this Mexican indigenous knowledge makes it onto the world stage. But we'll see, I guess, But what I could tell you is that as a small farmer, don't spend your money on chemicals. Don't think that you can't do nothing with the insects or pests or fungus or none of that. If you are a organic farmer, a regenerative farmer, or a tech farmer, traditional ecological knowledge or indigenous knowledge farmer, ecosystem farmer, you can still use, I would say, solutions for these problems you have, but make sure they're coming from nature and not coming from humans, because a lot of the problems, when they try to be solved through synthetic options, they're coming back and biting us in the ass really, really hard. So you have to remember, synthetic should always be the last option, right? In my case, it's not even an option, but in your repertoire of solutions as a farmer, it's like people tell me, like, okay, like, when are chemicals good to be used? And I've seen cases where I could definitely say, okay, that was justifiable, because if an organic farmer is about to lose all his crop, and then the only way to save that crop is to spray it, and then he's going to continue the rest after that being an organic farmer, right? I mean, there's cases where small farms that are really innovative and great farms, their career's on the line if they don't use these things. So it's not to say you're the devil if you ever use them, but you should know that they should be a last resort, and try to never ever use them. Whew. I have to go rescue a dog real quick. Stuck in the fence. But yeah, I hope you learned something today, and maybe you want to give saponins a try in your agricultural operations, but I'm already using them all the time. I think it's something that I may focus on in the future, right? Like, definitely see more potential in creating a saponin-based agricultural company versus spirits, I'll tell you that much. Because, it's like everybody wants to do spirits in California. And, I'm usually the guy that's like, what everyone is doing, that's usually the shit I don't want to do. Because saturation usually leads to issues. Just look at how leaves go in the agave industry right now, right? But anyways, I hope you learned something. Go out there and research saponins. Start off just Googling what are the, health benefits of saponins. How can saponin be used as a herbicide? How is saponin a pesticide? And you'll see nobody's bullshitting here, right? Go read it for yourself. I always tell you, you can listen to me, but what I am is a primer to accelerate your fucking research capabilities. And, if you only gain one thing from this whole podcast about saponins, it's to go read a little bit about saponins, right? And make the decision for yourself on how they could be useful to you. But hopefully I've provided some insights today on how they could potentially be useful. And catch you on the next one, y'all. If you got any questions on agave or cactus, let me know. And right now it's been raining balls in California, so don't let the good dry farming planting time pass you by. And if you want to plant some stuff, hit me up. Got bulk quantities on agave, cactus plants and seeds. All grown here in beautiful Los Angeles County, California. No bullshit imports from Mexico or Europe or Africa or none of that shit. We got all this stock here and we grow it here. And, no bullshit. We didn't have to go undercut some indigenous people in Mexico to get our fucking stock. But, catch you on the next one. Have a great rest of the day, y'all. And, Agave and Cactus Talk out.